The government has finally managed to expand the cabinet some 3 months after Prime Minister Pushpa Dahal assumed his office, and during which time he had to twice clear the floor test. The newly formed cabinet is a bag of new and old faces, while Prime Minister Dahal will continue to face the challenge of stabilizing the dynamics of alliance politics. Disputes have surfaced with coalition partners Nepali Congress, while Janamat Party has walked out of the government citing differences. Good evening, I am Prarambha Dahal. Let's begin with the main stories. Prime Minister Pushpa Dahal expands the cabinet. Cabinet still incomplete due to internal dispute in NC. Janamat walks out of the government. Second round of talks between the government and victims of loan sharks ends inconclusively. Next round to be held tomorrow. Donald Trump indicted by a Manhattan grand jury after a probe into hush money paid to porn star Stormy Daniels, becomes the first former US president to face criminal charges. And Nepal taking on Laos in the Prime Minister Three Nations Cup final at the moment. The match currently held at 1-0 as of now. Prime Minister Pushpa Dahal has expanded the cabinet some 3 months after he assumed the office of the executive chief. The new cabinet has embraced Nepali Congress, CPN Maoist Center, Janata Samajwadi, CPN Unified Socialist, Loktantrik Samajwadi and Nagarik Unmukti Party. President Ramchandra Paudel administered the oath of office and secrecy to the newly appointed ministers amid a function at Sheetal Niwas today itself. The new cabinet has Congress leader Purna Bahadur Khadka as Deputy Prime Minister and Defence Minister, while Prakash Sharma has been appointed the Minister for Finance. Sita Gurung of Nepali Congress has been appointed Urban Development Minister, while Ramesh Rizal has bagged Minister for Industry. Deputy Prime Minister from CPN Maoist Center, Narayan Kazi Shrestha, has been appointed Minister for Home Affairs. Likewise, Shakti Basnet of Maoist Center has bagged the Ministry of Energy. Meanwhile, Maoist Ministers Sudan Kirati, Rekha Sharma and Amanlal Modi have retained their ministerial portfolios. Kirati has been retained as Minister for Tourism, Rekha Sharma is the Minister for Information Technology, while Modi is the Minister for General Administration. Maoist Senator Sushil Shripali has been entrusted with the Minister of State for Culture, Tourism and Civil Aviation. Baburam Bhattrai led Nepal Samajwadi's Mahendra Rai Yadav has been appointed Minister for Women, Children and Senior Citizens. Likewise, Unified Socialist Prakash Jwala has been entrusted with the Ministry of Physical Infrastructure, while Beduram Bhusal has bagged the Ministry of Agriculture. Meanwhile, Janata Samajwadi Party's Ashok Rai has been appointed Minister for Education, Science and Technology. Nagarik Unmukti Party's Ranjita Shrestha has bagged the Ministry of Land Management, Cooperatives and Poverty Alleviation. Due to the internal disputes in Nepali Congress, the Shekhar Kodala-led faction has not sent names in the cabinet, which sources have said has obstructed the cabinet from receiving a full shape. In the meantime, Janamat Party, which was a part of the government, has walked out, expressing its discontentment. Prime Minister Dahal has held onto the ministries of Foreign Affairs, Health, Law, Forest, Sports and Water Supply. Rashtriya Swatantra Party, meanwhile, has not backed any ministries despite extending its support to the government. Rashtriya Jana Morcha has decided against joining the government at the moment. Meanwhile, a Minister of Water Supply, Abdul Khan, has resigned as his party Janamat walked out of the government today, expressing dissatisfaction in the share of ministerial portfolios. The Deputy Chair of Janamat Party, Khan, furnished his resignation to Prime Minister Pushpa Dahal at Singhadarbar earlier today. Janamat had been expressing its dissatisfaction regarding the share of ministries ever since joining the government led by CPN Maoist Center Chairperson Dahal. Janamat was to be allocated the Ministry of Industries, Commerce and Supplies while reshuffling the Council of Ministers. Khan, who initially was appointed a minister without portfolio, was later assigned with the Ministry of Water Supply. Expressing his dissatisfaction, Khan had not assumed his office for a few days earlier. He had assumed his office only after holding talks with Prime Minister Dahal. Khan grew more dissatisfied as he was retained as the Minister for Water Supply even after the coalition parties had discussed of switching him to the Ministry of Industries, Commerce and Supplies. The national economy has been reeling as the government has been forced to take loans to cover its expenses. The business sector has been badly dented due to high bank interest rates, while the general public is facing a back-breaking inflation. In the given scenario, the newly appointed Finance Minister Prakash Ranmad faces the challenge of mobilizing the economic activities and win the confidence of the private sector. In the face of low income, despite skyrocketing inflation, the consumption of goods in the market has gone down. The domestic factories need to cut down given the low consumption, while the imported goods too have not been sold. To aggravate the scenario, the bank interest rate has doubled in comparison to the past year. A number of businesses have been blistered due to their inability to pay interest. In the past 1 year, some 23,407 businesses have been blacklisted. Due to the partial ban on import, the government's foreign exchange reserve has posted a slight improvement. The ban on export, however, has greatly impacted the national revenue collection. 609 billion rupees revenue was collected till yesterday, while the government has already spent 647 billion rupees under various headings. The current expenditure has exceeded the revenue collection by 38 billion rupees. Of the development budget amounting to 380 billion rupees, only 24% of the amount, that is 94 billion, has been spent. In the meantime, the government is yet to pay 65 billion rupees to contractor companies who had finished their works. The newly appointed finance minister therefore faces the challenge of mobilizing the economy by piping out more investment and at the same time slashing off government expenditure. The second round of talks between the government and the victims of loan sharks too has ended inconclusively. The second round of talks held today at the Ministry of Home Affairs could not seek an agreement on the demands put forth by the victims of loan sharks. The meeting today was adjourned, agreeing to hold another round of dialogue at 11 a.m. tomorrow. The victims have demanded that the properties seized by the loan shark should be returned in the name of victims themselves. This was one of the main demands of their 9-point memorandum submitted to the government. The victims, who had walked all the way to the federal capital from Kathmandu from Burdivas in Province 2, covering the distance in 11 days, have also demanded a high-level commission to look into their case, scrapping a system called Thamsuk, the traditional handpaper agreement as well. The government talks team today had informed about the action undertaken so far to curb the illegal activities of loan sharks. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Pushpa Dahal is meeting the victims of loan sharks today itself. The victims have emphasized that they would not return to their home unless their demands are met. The victims have been trying to call upon Prime Minister Dahal ever since their arrival in Kathmandu earlier this week. High Court Patan has issued an interim order directing not to implement the directive of the Kathmandu metropolitan city for removal of unauthorized structures built by encroaching public land within 7 days. Hearing on the writ registered yesterday, the single bench of Judge Dheer Bahadur Chand has issued the verdict to this effect. Local residents of settlement, which was to be affected by the notice issued by the metropolis, had filed a writ at the Patan High Court. The writ was filed against the Kathmandu Metropolis, National Land Commission, Office of the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers, National Human Rights Commission and the High-Powered Committee for Integrated Development of the Bagmati Civilization, among others. The KMC had issued a notice for removal of unauthorized structures on the 25th of March. The 7-day deadline issued by the KMC was ending today. A demonstration was held in the capital demanding the scrapping of the name Koshi Province. The demonstrators have said that the name Koshi does not reflect the diverse cultural identity of the Province 1. The provincial government earlier this month on March 1 had named Province 1 as Koshi. Ever since, the province had seen sporadic cases of demonstrations against the decision. A group of ethnic communities who have formed a struggle committee demonstrated in the capital's Maithikar Mandala, demanding that the name Koshi be scrapped. Participants at the rally urged the government to address their demands at the earliest. This year's secondary education examination, SEE, once considered as the Iron Gate of education, has started from today. According to the National Examination Board, a total of 485,396 students are appearing in the SEE, which started from this morning. On the first day of SEE examination of English paper was conducted. A total of 2,037 examination centers have been allocated for the exam. The highest number of students attending the SCE is from Bagmati, where 102,000 students are sitting for the examination in 434 centers. Meanwhile, the lowest number of students is from Karnali Province at 38,608 students who are attending their exam at 179 centers. The SCE concludes on the 12th of April this month. It is now time for our segment Public Pulse, where you text us with your opinion.
Public Pulse.
The question is, what is your take on the transfer of employees without following regular criteria? Your options are A. Political interference, B. Interest of employees, and C. Financial gains. The voting is on. Type NEWS, select your option A, B or C and send it to 34001 to share your opinion with us. Time now for the international news. Donald Trump has been indicted by a Manhattan grand jury after a probe into hush money paid to porn star Stormy Daniels, becoming the first former U.S. president to face criminal charges even as he makes another run for the White House. The charges from an investigation led by Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg come as Trump seeks the Republican nomination to run again in 2024. The specific charges are not yet known as the indictment remains under seal. It has been reported that Trump faces more than 30 counts related to business fraud. Trump said he was completely innocent and indicated he would not drop out of the race. He accused Bragg, a Democrat, of trying to hurt his chances of winning re-election. Shortly after Trump appealed to supporters to provide money for a legal defense, he has raised over $2 million, according to his campaign, since he incorrectly predicted on 18th of March that he would be arrested 4 days later. The charges will likely be unsealed by a judge in the coming days. Trump will have to travel to Manhattan for fingerprinting and other processing at that point. Bragg's office said it had contacted Trump's attorney to coordinate a surrender, which a court official said would likely occur next Tuesday. Finland will become the 31st member of NATO after Turkey's parliament voted to approve its application. Turkey had delayed Finland's bid to join the West's defensive alliance for months, complaining the Nordic nation was supporting terrorists. Sweden, which applied to join NATO at the same time last year, is still being blocked by Ankara over similar complaints. Any NATO expansion needs the support of all of its members. Finland will now be formally admitted into NATO at its next summit, taking place in July in Lithuania. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan gave his final approval to Finland's bid earlier in March, praising the country's authentic and concrete steps on Turkish security. But his ongoing hostility to Sweden was clear as he again accused the country of embracing Kurdish militants and allowing them to demonstrate on the streets of Stockholm. The two Nordic nations abandoned their traditional military neutrality in response to Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Almost overnight, support for NATO membership leapt from an underwhelming one-third of Finns to almost 80%. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky marked 400 days of war, thanking the people of Ukraine for the collective struggle. Speaking during his daily evening address yesterday, Zelensky expressed a thought for everyone who supported the country and helped since the Russian invasion started in February 2022. Ukraine said Russian forces has made some gains inside the eastern battlefield city of Bakhmut, but at a heavy price in lives lost that has blunted Moscow's offensive as Kiev prepares a counter-strike of its own. The small mining city of Bakhmut has been the site of the bloodiest infantry battle in Europe since World War II, with Russian forces seeking their first victory since mid-2022. Ukraine has been on the defensive for nearly 5 months, but says it is planning a counter-offensive soon. 5 people have been arrested for alleged roles in the deaths of 39 people at a Mexican migrant detention center this week after a fire broke out. The head of the Attorney General Office's Human Rights Unit, Sarah Irene Herrerias, said 6 warrants were issued against 3 Immigration Institute officers, 2 private security officers, and the person who allegedly started the fire. Security Minister Rosa Isela Rodriguez said that a private security company was responsible for handling security matters at the center in the northern border city of Juarez. Rodriguez said a number of irregularities were found when authorities began looking into the company on Wednesday, adding that the government asked Mexico's Immigration Institute to withdraw its contract with the company. The company was contracted to have hundreds of employees working across 23 states, but reported having just 4 employees. Authorities have said they believe the fire, which killed male immigrants from El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Venezuela and Colombia, was started by migrants setting mattresses on fire as a form of protest. The fire is one of the deadliest migrant incidents in recent years. The U.S. State Department has urged citizens residing or traveling in Russia to leave immediately amid the arrest of an American reporter accused of espionage. A Moscow court ruled that U.S. national and journalist for the Wall Street Journal, Ivan Gerskovich, should be detained for nearly 2 months on suspicion of spying. U.S. President Joe Biden's administration said it was deeply concerned and that officials had been in touch with Gerskovich's employer and family. Analysts say the case will worsen already dire relations between Moscow and Washington, both nuclear powers. The U.S. is Ukraine's biggest military backer as Kiev battles a Russian invasion and has imposed sanctions on Moscow to try to persuade it to end its invasion of Ukraine. It is believed to be the first criminal case for espionage against a foreign journalist in post-Soviet Russia, a crime punishable by up to 20 years of imprisonment. 31-year-old Gerskovich is the highest-profile American arrested by Russia since basketball star Brittany Griner, who was caught arriving in Moscow with cannabis oil a week before the Ukraine invasion and freed in a prisoner swap 10 months later. Welcome back. It is now time for the sports news.
Sports news.
Hosts Nepal are up against Laos in the final of the Prime Minister Three Nations Cup. The title decider kicked off at 5:30 this evening at the Dashat Stadium in Tripureshwar. The visiting Laos team too took an early lead against the run of play as Pothawong Sangvile opened the scoring for Laos. The Nepali defense was caught napping by a swift move made by Laos in the 17th minute. The joys for Laos were short-lived as Nepal came back into the match with an equalizer in the 24th minute. The goal was scored by midfielder Ayush Khalan. When the report last reached us, Nepal and Laos are tied at 1-1 until the end of the first half. Earlier in their first match of the tournament, Nepal had defeated Laos 2-0. The team placed 187th in the FIFA rankings. In the second match of the tournament, Nepal were held to a 1-1 draw by Bhutan. Chelsea reached the Women's Champions League semi-finals after a thrilling game against defending champions Olympique Lyon, winning a penalty shootout 4-3 after the tie ended 2-2 on aggregate. The hosts had the advantage after beating Lyon 1-0 in the first leg, but 2 goals from the French team and a last-gasp penalty for Chelsea sent the match into penalties. The English side will next face Barcelona, who crushed Roma 5-1 on Wednesday to go through 6-1 on aggregate. Arsenal reached the semi-finals for the first time in 10 years after beating Bayern Munich 2-0 on Wednesday. Meanwhile, Wolfsburg booked a Women's Champions League semi-final meeting with Arsenal after clinching a narrow 2-1 aggregate win against Paris Saint-Germain. In the second leg match played at Wolfsburg's home ground at the Volkswagen Arena last night, Germany striker Alexandra Popp extended the two-time champions' 1-0 lead from the first leg with a stunning opener. Popp started Wolfsburg's first attacking charge in the 20th minute, linking up with Felicitas Roche for a 1-2 pass before sliding into a stunning shot that looped over Sarah Bohadi's head and into the PSG net. Diani's goal in the 30th minute gave the French side hope, but they struggled to convert chances in the second half to level the tie. Wolfsburg will host Arsenal, who knocked out Bayern Munich on the 22nd of April. That is all for the moment. Thank you for staying with us. Goodbye for now.